ה-28 לדצמבר, אני פשוט עושה את הוידאו הזה במיוחד קצר, ועל אותו, כבר אני שמתי את זה בוידאו אחר, בשילוב של עוד משהו. אני פשוט רוצה גם שתראו את זה בתרגום העברית, ושתבינו את המשמעות של מה שהוא אומר כאן. לכן אני עושה את זה קצר, כדי שתתרכזו במה שהוא אומר. כי מה שנעשה בישראל נעשה בהרבה מדינות. השאלה, איך האנשים ידעו לפעול בהתאם. ואני יודעת שאצלנו זה מאוד מסובך, מאוד מאוד מסובך, בגלל גם שהם דאגו להעמיס את המשרדים שבכל פינה תהיה לנו התקפה. ואנחנו צריכים לדאוג, א', להסיר או על ידי מכתבים או כל דבר אפשרי, להפסיק לשלם, להחליט שאנחנו כולנו לא משלמים יותר מיסים, או לעשות איזשהו דבר, להשבית את המשק לגמרי, ברגע שאותם גופים לא ייכנס כסף, כי הם זקוקים לכסף היומי, אם זה השוטרים עם הקנסות, אם זה כל המצלמות שדואגים שבאופן קבוע תהיה הכנסה, יש את המשרדים, משרד הבריאות צריך באופן קבוע את הקטע של זריקות, תרופות, יש לו 113 מחלקות. אז האוצר דואג להעביר את האנשים שלו לתוך המערכת. האוצר והבנק ישראל, יחד עם הממשלה, הם גוף פרטי, שהסברתי כבר בווידאו אחד, הם ביחד מכניסים לכל אותם משרדים את האנשים שלהם כמנכ"לים. אז צריך לעקוב אחרי כל דבר ולהפסיק לחלוטין לממן אותם. זו הדרך היחידה שאנחנו ננצח, כי אנחנו רבים, אסור לנו לפחד, אסור לנו לשרת אותם בכלום, לא צבא, לא שום דבר, שום מלחמה, שום סיפורים. שיקרו לכם מ-2020 בלי סוף, והם ממשיכים עד היום. הם ממשיכים עם החיסונים כי אף אחד לא אומר כלום.
Yeah. And I want to talk to you about a very important subject that so many people around the world still don't grasp. They cannot get it into their head. And this is the difference between central banks and what could be called a people's bank. And until the people, the majority of the people around the world really grasp this, and until the penny drops for the majority of the people, in other words, the critical mass of people, we will forever remain slaves by those that control the supply of money. Because the central banks of the world are not what people think. So let me spell this out for you. And please share this knowledge and information with everyone you know. And if they don't understand it, or if people argue with you, if they tell you, oh, that's nonsense, it's not true, they simply don't know what they're talking about. And they've fell victim to believing the lies of their teachers or their, their jobs or their banks or whatever, or their university professors that tell them stories about how the money system works, because that's how they were programmed and indoctrinated and lied to, so they keep...
Honestly, you shouldn't buy this book, because once you do, you'll never look at your medicine cabinet the same way again. Let me explain.
Perpetrating the lie forward. So central banks are private companies and private corporations that do not belong to the government, to the country, to the people. These corporations have nothing to do with the well-being of our countries, of our communities, and our people. Central banks are private corporations that operate outside of the jurisdiction, the legal jurisdiction of our countries. Now let that penny drop, let that sink in. You cannot sue the central bank. No one in the world can ever sue a central bank. It's not possible. There is nothing in the legislature anyway, in our constitutions, that allow us to sue the central banks. because these central banks corporations, and this is obviously under the leadership and the ownership of the Rothschild banking empire, with the Rockefellers being the other big name there, and various other big banking families, many of whose names are not even familiar to us because they are very, very secretive. And they've kept this power and control over our countries for so long because they've kept it secret. And these are all shell companies and companies hidden all over the world that control our countries and our governments without us realizing it. So let's go through how central banks work. And like I said, if anybody contests and argues with you, they simply don't know what they're doing. And you need to either try and explain this to them or simply show them this video or give them some other material to read, like the what's it, Monster from Jekyll Island, or whatever that book is called. That's a very important one. And there are many other incredible books that give the detailed information about this. So central banks have basically infiltrated our governments, and through very powerful people that they've positioned in the governments. The United States was a great example of the creation of the Fed. In 1913, when they created that new law that the Fed is going to become the central bank of the United States, which should never have happened. The same thing happened in all other countries: the Bank of England, the Reserve Bank of South Africa, the central banks of all countries, all privately owned companies that belong to this banking cartel that control all the central banks of the world. And they've set up a company called the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. And from Basel, Switzerland, and the Bank for International Settlements, that's where they control all the central banks of the world. They send out very strict directives and instructions and code of conduct and behaviors to all the central banks of the world. And those central banks are basically satellite offices for the central office that runs from the City of London in the United Kingdom, not the town, not London, the City of London, which is that square mile, secretive square mile in London, that's known as the City of London. That's where all of this is happening and controlled from, right? This is why it's so secretive and so confusing, and people simply don't understand it. And they somehow, most people think that somehow our governments are just incompetent and they don't know how to work with money. Well, that is not the case, because these central banks we borrow money from these central banks. They lend money to our governments. In other words, they have attained the right to print and control the supply of money to our governments and our countries. Now, think about this insanity. We have a private company that operates outside of the jurisdiction, outside of the legal system of our country, that have bestowed upon them the right and the unique right to print and issue money for our countries. I know some people might argue that they don't do the printing is done by the mint. I use the word collectively, okay? They have the right, they issue that right, they instruct the mint to print the money, and the mint then distributes it. It's all part of the giant big cartel. It's literally the global banking mafia cartel that has stolen the world from us by instituting and imposing and putting their central banks in each country. There are very few countries that don't belong to the Rothschild banking empire. It's like North Korea and Iran and so forth. But to really get to the crux of this, the difference between the central bank and a people's bank is exactly that. When we implement a people's bank, that means that we, the people, control the issuing of our money, the issuing and the printing of our money. And the government is the agent that issues and prints the money on our behalf, to us, to the people, which means that we can print as much money as we need and issue money from our government to all the state enterprises, whether it's developing of education, railroads, road systems, infrastructure, engineering, setting up technologies, research, healthcare, housing, everything we can think of as a community. We should be able to fund ourselves with an infinite supply of money. Now, pay attention to this. And many academics and people that study, finance and all this at universities, unfortunately, are poisoned by the current banking system and the fraud that's been perpetrated on humanity everywhere. We have the capacity to supply an infinite amount of money to ourselves from our own people's banks. And in essence, this is what Hitler did. This is what made him so hated by the Rothschilds, because he took away the power of the Rothschilds to print money in Germany, because Germany was so destroyed after World War I by the Treaty of Versailles and made, to pay back so many, infinite amount of debt. And that's what Hitler did. And that's what really made him so hated by the Rothschilds. And that's why one of the mechanisms he used to make Germany so successful literally overnight, because he created the People's Bank, the Reichsbank, that was able to create a different kind of money for the people of Germany. Now, every leader in every country, every government in every country has the power to do this, because you are the leader of the country. If you have the military on your side, if you have the police and the military and the armed services and every...
אם יש לכם את הצבא, את האנשים שלכם, אלה שמייצגים אתכם בצבא, לכם יש את הכוחות, אתם האנשים, אתם יכולים לקבוע. דבר ראשון, להעיף את הבנק הזה שקורא לעצמו בנק ישראל, זה מה שנקרא Central Bank, בנק מרכזי, שאי אפשר לתבוע אותו בכלל. ומי נותן לו הוראה איך להדפיס וכמה להדפיס? הוא הביא את החבר שלו, שם את בנק ישראל, והראיתי כבר שהם כולם משולש אחד, האוצר, בנק ישראל והממשלה שהיא זכיין בריטי, שזה בעצם רוטשילד. המלוכה הבריטית, הזכיין הבריטי, המלוכה הבריטית ממזמן כבר לא מלוכה בריטית. אז מה שקורה, הזכיין הבריטי מחזיק גם באוצר, גם בבנק ישראל, וגם מחליט, יש לו את המנהל שאומר לו, הוא מקבל הוראה כמה צריך להדפיס, כמה כסף, כמה הוא נותן, במקום שאנחנו ניקח את השליטה. זה דבר ראשון, אם יש לנו את הצבא, זה מה שהצבא צריך כרגע לעשות. לדאוג להעיף, אין מה לעשות. להודיע, אנחנו מוכנים לשרת. אבל אנחנו רוצים את הניהול שאנחנו האנשים, רוצים את הניהול הכספי. אנחנו נחליט כמה נדפיס, אנחנו נחליט באיזה מטבע נשתמש.
Countries. Our right should be for any government or any leader to say, thank you, the central banks, thank you, Mr. Rothschild. We know how a printing press works. We can print our own money. We will no longer be using your central bank printed money. And we're going to start issuing our own money for ourselves so we can actually turn our country around, don't owe you any money. And remember, our presidents, our leaders could literally turn around overnight and say, thank you, Mr. Rothschild, and we hereby cancel all the debt that we have to you. We don't owe you anything because you created the money out of thin air. And this, I think, is a really important thing. Maybe I should have said this right up front, because remember, these central banks, they have nothing. It's not as if they have some assets hidden somewhere. They create money out of thin air, and then they sell that money to us at an interest. So our governments borrow money from the central banks at an interest, and we have to pay the central banks, the Rothschild banks, back with interest. And that's what creates inflation. That's what puts us in debt. That's what gets us into big trouble. And this is why these big corporations and the banks end up owning everything. Think about it. If you
watch what magnesium does to your bowels.
If you have to wipe 1,000,000 times after you poop, here's why.
The Mayo Clinic.
If you don't make your payments for your car, if you don't make your payments for your farm, who takes your car? The bank takes your car. When you don't pay your farm, who takes your farm? The bank takes your farm. If you don't pay your house, who takes your house? The bank takes your house. It's not the government, it's the bank. And there you can see the government has nothing to do with the money. It's the bloody banks. So this is so important for people to understand. The moment, in essence, any president could just declare, as of tomorrow, we are closing the Reserve Bank or the central bank, and we are turning it into a people's bank. And nothing has to change except the printing presses that start to run and start to mint our own money. Our money, it belongs to our country, our people. And then we can print as much money as we need for education, for arts, culture, transport, railways, space exploration, anything we choose. We, the people, using the government as our representatives, should be setting up all these agencies and research facilities and amazing industrial activities for us, the people, be able to achieve this. And we have the capacity to create and print as much money as we want and we need to do that to the best of our abilities. That means no one should ever be homeless. No one should ever be without work or without a job. And we should constantly have the latest technology and innovation happening in the most advanced research facilities that we could possibly imagine. That's what would happen when we start to run our own people's banks. Now, the People's Bank is not a final solution, but it is a very important step towards bringing freedom, true freedom and liberty to the people of our countries, of all countries of the world, allowing them to feel the sense of freedom, feel the sense that they're alive, that they can live and explore their God-given talents, their skills and their abilities. Because with a People's Bank, any kind of initiative that helps the community, helps the people, helps the country progress, helps the country create prosperity and abundance, should be funded by the People's Bank, because it is ultimately going to help everybody in the community. So in a sense, it is the first step towards contributionism, or creating the means to create sustainability and create prosperity and abundance for all of us in all our towns, all our countries, all our cities, all over the world. So what did I miss? What did I leave out here? I sense that I might have forgotten something. Let's go through the bullet points. Central banks don't belong to the government or the people. They're private institutions that somehow have taken on the right, the exclusive right in the world, to create and print money for our countries. Our governments borrow money from these central banks that cannot be sued, that they operate outside of our legal system, outside of our legislation, outside of our constitutions. We borrow money from these central banks at an interest rate, and that's why we get into debt, and that's why we have inflation. And this is why you hear when the central bank has adjusted the repo rate and the interest rate, and this has got always huge, ripple effect across all the economies of the world, and our towns and our countries, when the central bank adjusts or raises the interest rate or drops the interest rate, all this kind of nonsense. That should never, ever be part of our reality. We borrow money from them, and we owe them money back, and this is how we get into debt. With a People's Bank, none of this happens. We create all the money we need for ourselves. That's really all I wanted to share with you. Let this sink in, and share this with everybody. And let's start putting pressures on our presidents, on our leaders, on our prime ministers to say, hey, why are you supporting a central bank or a private bank that is not controlled and owned by the people? Remember Thomas Jefferson's famous words. This is one of my favorite statements. If we allow the banks to issue the currency and the money for our people, they will become so powerful, they'll take control of everything, and people will lose the land and everything that they've fought so hard for. I don't have it verbatim, but something like that. He said that banking institutions are more dangerous to our freedoms and liberties than standing armies, because banks will ultimately take everything from us. And this is what's busy happening right now. So pay attention to this. Let this sink in, and let's start putting pressure on our presidents, our prime ministers, and our leaders to say, why are you supporting the Rothschild Central Bank? Close them down and start a People's Bank. This is a very important thing. And if you don't know this yet, you should know this. This is most likely why JFK was assassinated in 1963, which was shortly after he started to print the United States note. The United States notes that was no longer minted or printed by the Fed, and it became known as the United States note. And it was basically, in essence, he in secret created a People's Bank, but nobody seemed to have known about it. And that's why they took him out And very quickly, the Fed was in control of the money in the USA again. This has happened in many countries around the world over the last 50, 60 years, and even further back than that. In fact, the First World War most likely started as a result of that, when Franz Ferdinand did not want to play the game with the Rothschild banking family. And Franz Ferdinand of the Austro-Hungarian Empire did not want to play the Rothschild game. They had him assassinated in Sarajevo, and that sparked the First World War. So these banking families and the Rothschild banking empire is the most powerful corporation in the world. It is most likely the most evil corporation in the world, because it has enslaved every single living, breathing human being with their central banking system. So on that note, I hope that gives you some insight and really important things to consider. Until next time, this is Michael Tillinger. Bye for now.
הבנתם? למרות שלא היה כסף, עשה את זה מכספי אוויר ועבדים. העבדים שהוא הביא מאושוויץ, בחר אותם, מי צריך להיות על האדמה ומי יקים את האדמה. הנדבן הידוע, אנשים אפילו בארץ לא מוכנים להסכים ולהשלים עם המרמה הזאת, עם מה שעשו. אבל אתם חובה על כולם להתעורר. זה לא מדינה היחידה שעשו, זה ישראל, עם היהודים. אבל זו הייתה הזדמנות פז בשבילו, לחסל את